Now that we've fetched all emails from the inbox, we're going to go and explore how we can list all of the folders inside our email account. There are many different folders such as a drafts folder, a sent folder, and a trash. Let's learn how to list all of those folders and their respective emails. We already know how to fetch emails from the inbox, so it's just a matter of refactoring what we've done in the previous lesson in order to take a folder name as a parameter. So here we are in the editor, and I'm going to create another test. It is a system test because we're still going to interact with the IMAP server. I'll call it listfolderstest.rb. Let's do something really similar to fetching the emails. I'm going to require all of this and create a new test class. So I'll just paste this in and require the email model as well and fetch emails too. But this time we're going to require the extra list folder service, and we're also going to create a new folder model. This folder will be the structure in our system that will hold information on the folder and respective emails. With that said, let's change the name of the class to be listfolderstest. This class will act very similarly to the previous one. We will instantiate a service in the class execution. I'll call it listfolders.new, and I'll execute it right away. This way we can perform assertions on top of this service. I'll make it a class variable so we can access it throughout the entire list of tests. The first one will be lists folders. And I'm going to create another one that will assert on each folder having an email or a list of them. So I'll call the test folder has emails. I'm going to skip this test just for a while. I just want to make sure we don't forget to assert on this. So first things first, let's assert that the service contains a list of folders. So first assert kind of array, or rather kind of folder, and I'm going to assert on the service folders.first. This will assume that I have an enumerable of folders here. So with that said, let's run the test suite. It will run that test and it will tell us what to do. You can see that we don't have any folder file, so we'll create it. Under models, I'll type in the folder.rb file, and I'm just going to open it. Let's define the courier module and inside the folder class. I'm going to make things easier for now, and I'm going to initialize it with a name. Then I'm going to instantiate the name instance variable to that value. Let's run the test suite again, and this time we won't have the list folder service. Let's create it as well. Let's go to services and type in listfolders.rb. Let's open it as well and define the courier module and inside the list folders class. Okay, there you go. Inside, I'm going to define the execute method, and this time we should have a folders instance variable. If I define a reader method for the folders, I should get a nil for that message. So let's run it again, and you'll see that first is not defined for nil. Instead of implementing that, I'm going to create a method called folders and return the folders instance variable. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to default to an empty array. This will make up for an expectation error. We expected it to be a folder, but it's nil. Our skeleton is complete. Now we need to actually implement the execute method. So let's think of this for a second. We need to connect to the IMAP server. Then we need to list all of the folders, and for each one of the folders, I'm going to make sure that I fetch all of the emails. So I'll type in fetch emails and pass in the folder. Let's define those methods really quick. These are going to be private, so I'll pass in the private keyword. The first method is called connect, then the list folders, which takes a block, and also the fetch emails method. It takes a folder, so we're good to go. Notice the detail of using a block to fulfill our requirements. In fact, we want to perform an action for each different folder. If I'm going to list folders and I assume I'm going to iterate over them, I'm going to fetch the emails for that particular folder. Instead of looping through each of the folders again and using 2 different loops for fetching the emails, I'll use something like this to accomplish it. Let's run the tests again, and you can see that we still get the same expectation. That's great. Everything's in place. We can now start and fulfilling the details of each different method. The IMAP connection will be stored in an IMAP instance variable. I'll call net imap.new, and I'll pass env courier server. Remember, this is the variable that I've instantiated in the shell. Next, we're going to log in as we did with the previous example. Let's just make sure that at the end of the entire service, the IMAP connection is disconnected, just like we did in the previous lesson. Now let's run the tests to see if everything is working okay up until now. And it is. We still get the expectation error. Let's move on to the next step. Remember, we are doing these steps assuming that we know a little bit about the IMAP connection. If you were to be insecure about this, then probably you should detail a little more about your code, provide a little more test coverage, and stuff like that. Now, this is the new part regarding the IMAP connection. We want to list all of the folders available in our email account. For that, you can type in the list command. The list command requires 2 arguments. One is the search pattern, and the other one is the folder in which is going to list all of the folders. So this works as a recursive kind of thing. If you want to list all folders inside the inbox folder, then you would type in inbox like this, and it would fetch the folders that match this criteria under the inbox folder. For our particular case, we just want to fetch all of the different folders, so we use star in each one of the arguments. This is going to retrieve the entire list of folders, and this is going to be returned into a list variable. On that, I'm going to use the each method and pass in the folder. Let's just stop for a little while, and I'm going to pass in a binding.pry to learn about what's the content of this folder. We got a list of folders, but we don't know its structure. And for that, I'm going to stop the execution right here. We will get access to that folder variable, which we can learn about. And I get a mailbox list object. Here's the name, as you can see. If I leave the execution now, I'm going to get another folder, and this one, for example, is called inbox.junk. So I'm just going to exit the entire list of folders, and now that I know that it has a name, I'm going to create a new folder into our folders list. So I take the folders variable and I'm going to inject a new folder like this. I'm going to pass in folder.name and I'm going to yield the block. So I pass yield and then the folder. Remember, I'm passing in the folder object. This is our new entity. We're going to have to deal with it from now on. We control this kind of object, so it's more than safe to use our own type of variables than a folder that Ruby has to manipulate the IMAP protocol. This entire execution works as an adapter to retrieve the list of folders. So with that being said, we need to focus our attention in lines 31 and forward. Now that we have our own folder which has its own name, we are going to retrieve the entire list of emails from that folder. We already know how to do that for the inbox folder. There you go. In line 24, we have this. We are examining a single mailbox, but we can turn this into a parameter. So let's first refactor this examine method and use a folder name. I'm going to initialize the fetch emails object by creating an initialize method. For now, it will have an options variable, and I'm going to instantiate the folder to be the options folder, or if it doesn't exist, I'm going to pass inbox. This way I'll keep the tests intact. I'll just provide a folder reader method so I can use it, just the same way as I'm using here in the examine method. Let's run the tests and see if it is working. As you can see, it's not. We forgot to mention that the options variable could default to an empty hash. Let's run the tests again. And now we get an error regarding our very last test. In line 26 here, as you can see, I'm getting an error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the parentheses. Let's run the tests again. And this time you get a passing test. This is great. We are now able to assert that the folders variable in the service is an array, or an enumerable for that matter. The first item is actually a folder. Now we get the chance to assert that the folder has a set of emails. So now I'm going to assert that in the emails list for the folder is actually an email. So I'll use assert kind of email and then service.folders.first.emails.first. I'll assume that the emails is going to be an enumerable as well, and the first item will be an email. I'm confident enough that every single item in the emails list is going to be an email. So let's go and focus on this method. Let's run the tests first and foremost, and you can see that the emails method is not available in the folder class. Let me just open that really quick in a new tab. I'm going to establish a new emails method, and it's going to return the value of emails. If it doesn't exist, I'll assign it to an empty array. Let's run the tests once again, and you can see that we get nil instead of email. Okay, all we need to do is work on this method. This is our only focus now. Let's take a look at the fetch emails class for now. As you can see, we are establishing a folder which we'll use here in the fetch emails. What we can do is pass in the folder as an option to the initializer and then call that service. It will retrieve the entire set of emails. Let's try and do something about it. I'm going to establish a new service called fetchemails.new, and I'll pass in the folder. The folder it is going to be the same as folder.name. Remember that this folder is an instance of folder. For now, let's stick by passing the name and calling the service method called execute. This should retrieve a set of different emails, and what we can do is type in the folder method and call in add email, or rather add emails. I'm going to pass in the series of different emails available in this new service. So there you go. This is a good interface for our folder class. We are going to add in a bunch of different emails that are the service's emails. There's still one thing that I want to bring up the attention to. We are going to use two different connections. We already have one in this particular service and in the email service. We are connecting here, as you can see, so we need to come up with a way of using one single IMAP connection. I'm not very comfortable with using two of them at the same time. So I want to keep the same interface, at least for the public side. But I want to make sure that I inject the IMAP connection if there is one already. So I'm going to instantiate a new IMAP instance variable to be options IMAP. Now the next step is in line 24, and in the connect step, I'm only going to do this unless the IMAP connection is already there. So that part is settled, but now what if I want to use the same connection over and over again for listing more than one folder? Should I disconnect the connection at the first try? Well, not exactly. I want to make sure that I disconnect if nothing is specified. So the default case is to disconnect, but if I don't want to, such as the case of listing multiple folders, I want to instantiate a new option in the service in line 32. So I'll instantiate a new keep alive option to true, and I'm going to instantiate keep alive as an instance variable in this service. Keep alive is options keep alive, or I'll default to false. The keep alive option will default to false because this has been like that all along. I want to disconnect unless the keep alive option is true. Let's see if this still works. It's a good thing we have tests to make sure that these all work. So let's run them. And you can see that the add emails method is not defined. That's okay. Let's just go to the folder class and define the add emails method, and it takes a bunch of emails. All I'll do is pick up on the emails and add in whatever emails we passed in as the parameter. Remember, it is already there, so we're just going to add them in. Let's run the test suite now. And you can see that the add emails method is still undefined. But notice, as we are actually calling in the wrong object. NetImap mailbox list is the object that's calling that method. So something's wrong in line 35, so let's open that and focus it. The folder that we're passing here is actually the mailbox list, which is not correct. Instead, we want to pass in this instance variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that in here, call it folder, and then this is the folder data. I'm going to replace folder data.name here, and I'm going to inject the folder and yield the block with the folder. See what I did there? I have just renamed the item in the block because it makes more sense to add in the folder variable to a folder class rather than this. Now let's go ahead and run the tests again, and this should be okay. Method is undefined for name on the folder. That's easy to fix. Let's just add a reader method called name. This way the name is accessible to the outside. Running the tests, you can see that in line 13, the plus method is undefined. Let's go to line 13. And emails is not defined. So instead of using the instance variable, I'll use this. This will populate the emails instance variable. And for that reason alone, I should switch this name. So I'm going to swap it with email list. Unfortunately, if we keep it like this, it will break the tests. They will not run okay because we still get that nil. Let's do this in a different way. I'm going to reach out to the actual list of emails like this, and I'm going to push that email list. So I'll type in email list, and then I'm just going to call the flatten method. I'll assign the entire result to emails. This way we won't lose any emails we already had. We push in that entire list and flatten it out. We will get a new list with the previous ones and the new ones. If I run the test suite like so, we will get an error because we need to actually retrieve the list of emails if it's not been initialized. I'm going to use the emails message like so, and it will get me the new instance variable. Running the test suite now, it will pass, as you can see. We have all 5 tests working, and that means that the changes that we performed in the fetch email service were okay. Every change that we did didn't affect the previous test suite. The new one contemplates the list folder service and its interaction with the fetch email service. So this is great. We now can fetch emails from the default inbox folder, and we can list the entire list of folders. Now is the time we put this into our screen. All of the emails that are provided in that email account that I created will be displayed. We'll create our Thor application with our first task. So I'll see you soon.